In the late hours of June 2022, a monument in Georgia was bombed. It destroyed a large section of the landmark consisting of 4 large stones and a headstone. They featured things which humanity had to do in order to live in a harmonious utopia, translated into 8 languages. It was colloquially known as the American Stonehenge, a moniker fitting of its giant size and astronomical features. The destruction, however, came as no surprise to the locals. This monument was subject to controversy from day one. It was practically set for demolition from the day of its unveiling. Between 1980 and 2022, Elbert County, Georgia was home to a peculiar granite monument, the Georgia Guidestones. Commissioned by somebody using a pseudonym, sponsored by various mysterious benefactors, the mysteries surrounding it are fascinating to say the least, and I just wanted to talk about it. Anyways. It is currently the year 1979. We arrive at a granite finishing company in Alberton. A man who uses the name Robert C. Christian has just entered into these offices with a simple goal in mind. He wants to purchase a monument, one which he proclaims is for the conservation of mankind, whatever that meant. He talks to company president Joe Finley for nearly half an hour before he is convinced to sign off on the project. Christian mentions how he represents a small group of Americans who believed in God. He also goes on and on about visiting various places throughout Europe, and Stonehenge being the most impressive sight during that continent-spanning trip. And so after a few agreements, the construction process began. Due to the sheer size of these stones, each of them had to be lifted directly from the earth, which was a very tall order. Elberton had faced the hardest challenge in the long history of granite mining so far. Months of work went into carving and extracting each stone. Weeks were spent sandblasting a message to humanity in 8 different languages. When all was said and done, the finished sculpture was 19 feet tall. But now came the challenge of picking its location. Various people checked each and every square mile for the perfect destination, eventually settling on the highest point in Elberton. After having some talks with the owner of this plot of land, the Georgia Guidestones were placed there, and officially unveiled on March 21st, 1980.
Over 951 cubic feet of granite make up the 11 pieces of the monument.
We must stress today the need for self-control, for self-restraint, and yes, self-government, all of which I interpret in this Georgia Guidestone.
The sense of permanence is there, and we do know this. The Georgia Guidestones are some of the largest granite monuments ever erected, and they can be seen for years to come on Georgia Highway 77, 7 miles north of Elberton.
The information you just heard was provided by a 50-page booklet published in 1981 by the very company that was commissioned to make this thing. It gives us a first-hand account of the behind the scenes of making this. I highly recommend checking it out, it's pretty interesting. The link is in the description. Alright, let's talk about the monument for a second. Like I mentioned, the monument consists of 4 large stones, with a capstone on top that reads, "Let these be guidestones to an age of reason," and the other stones read as follows. As you can perhaps guess from these inscriptions, it's a pretty utopic world Christian is envisioning. The sponsors of this project were very keen on having these things achieved for world prosperity. There's a very long section in that book that I mentioned which are supposedly from the sponsors' very own words, explaining their plan and going into detail on why they sponsored such a strange sculpture. The stones also feature 4 languages which aren't even spoken anymore, because this monument was supposed to stand for a very, very long time. If humanity ever went close to extinction, they could use these stones for a guide as to what to do in that scenario. If only it were that simple. As soon as it was erected, the Georgia Guidestones were subjects of various conspiracy theories, ranging from New World Orders to satanic rituals. And it's kind of hard to blame these nut jobs, especially when these stones have such strange circumstances surrounding them. Without any clear answers, it all seems like a plot to destroy the world. There is, however, a hint of truth to these. Sandblaster Charlie Clamp, who was tasked with sandblasting the words in each stone, reportedly heard voices guiding him and strange music accompanying his task. One may ponder if this was just a typical psychological thing or something deeply spiritual. After all, the actual Stonehenge is used for various occult activities every year. It's nothing far-fetched, right? You never know these kinds of conspiracies. The stones were built with illusion, and they were destroyed because of one. But this is not the end of our story. After the explosion hit, the stones were demolished. Although people wanted them to return, it was just decided to leave it be, just destroy the monument entirely. Now that the stones are gone, who was Robert Christian? Many consider his name to be a hint of the true nature behind these stones. R.C. Christian is a pretty obvious nod to Rosicrucians, a secret society of Christians that were established in the 15th century by Christian Rosenkreuz. This secret society, which still exists by the way, believes that Rosenkreuz had impeccable knowledge which allowed them to do various alchemical stuff. As is the case with many secret societies, this order has come under scrutiny by certain folks and is alleged to be completely evil and plotting the New World Order or whatever. So yeah, that could actually be true. There's actually far more credence to this theory other than like the name. Check out the link in the description if you want to know more. He wrote and published his own book in 1986, Common Sense Renewed, which talked about his insane ideology at length, and he never appeared again. He commissioned the monument, wrote a book 7 years later, and then vanished off the face of the earth. Well, that is if we forget to include Wyatt Martin. You may be asking who that guy is. This is in fact the first time I mentioned him in the script. He's a newcomer to the story, but a pretty important one in unraveling the mystery of this identity. Wyatt was Robert's agent for many decades. This man is our only source on who this man could actually be. But Wyatt Martin is dead, and Robert C. Christian is also dead. He has been dead for a while. So, where do we turn to in this trying time? The only guy who must have known him is dead, and then that means he has truly gone. From this earth, he has vanished without a trace. Robert C. Christian is no more. The Georgia Guidestones are gone. This was just one of the many, many hints of something bigger, more dystopian going on. Martin was, in a way, Robert's biggest fan. He managed to keep so many records of this man's existence. That's true dedication, but now the dust has settled. He literally took that mystery to the grave. In 2015, a documentary was made about the Guidestones, one where the film crew managed to interview Wyatt Martin when he was still alive and uncover some of his documents. In one instance, he even showed them a postcard from Christian, which was from Fort Dodge, Iowa, alongside another document from 1998, one where Robert said he was old enough to remember the days of the Dust Bowl and that he was 70 years old. With these clues, the documentary crew managed to track down a suspect, Herbert Kirsten. He was a physician who matches a lot of the descriptions we have of Robert. He was 78 in 1998. He also wrote a great deal about this overpopulation stuff, in a tone very similar to Robert C. Christian. Of course, there are a lot of people in America who do this kind of thing. It could just be a coincidence, but come on. The postcard came from the same place. It's stated to be from Robert Christian. Fort Dodge didn't have that many people. I mean, it must have been a huge coincidence if it was a different guy. I mean, come on. Case closed. Video over. Well, you always gotta take these revelations with a grain of salt. Of course, there are far too many similarities between Mr. Kirsten and Robert Christian, but these could also just be massive coincidences. With 3 key players in the story being dead, and the monument itself no longer existing, it's safe to say this mystery is never going to be completely solved. There's still a ton of unanswered questions when it comes to the Georgia Guidestones, but there's an oft overlooked part of its legend, which is the fact that it's a roadside attraction, a tourist spot first and foremost. You know, it took me a while to realize this. I was in the middle of writing the script when it finally clicked. This is just a tourist spot, right? A nice little whatever in the middle of nowhere for people to gawk at. I've seen the Google Street View images of Alberton. It's a very normal town. There aren't many crazy sights in here. If you don't read the text and ignore the conspiracy theories and the mysterious bullshit, it's just a nice monument. A monument which lit up the community. Alberton kind of made this monument their thing for a while. It had a museum about it, built miniatures, all that jazz. And now it's just another American town. When you have such an interesting monument nearby, sometimes you ask too many questions.
So would it be accurate to say that Mr. Kirsten was a white supremacist?
Racist to his fingertips.